In 1908, one man built the American middle class. Henry Ford literally put this country on wheels. He paid workers enough to buy their own cars. It was pure industrial genius. Ford seemed utterly invincible. The world was his. Nothing could stop this incredible machine. Until they stopped themselves. Fast forward 116 years, $4.7 billion. That is what Ford lost in just 1 year. That was in 2023. This is the exact same legendary company. Now they are bleeding out fast. You have to ask yourself why. How does a titan bleed so much cash? The answer hides in their past. So what exactly happened here? How did America's greatest car company fall so far? Empires never collapse overnight. They rot from the inside out. The decay is slow, but it is always fatal. The warning signs were always there. You just had to look closely. It all started with a deadly choice, a choice that literally cost human lives. Go back to the 1970s. Ford made a totally reckless decision. Their own engineers put the truth in writing. They knew their new car had a fatal flaw. They knew people would die in rear-end crashes. The risk of fire was absolute. They shipped the car anyway. You probably know this car. It was the Ford Pinto. It was a ticking time bomb. $11. That is all it took. Just $11 to fix a deadly gas tank. The tank ruptured at only 20 miles per hour. A minor fender bender became a brutal death sentence. Fire would instantly engulf the passengers. But Ford executives refused to pay. They kept the $11 instead. They chose profits over your safety. This is pure corporate darkness. Ford ran a chilling cost-benefit analysis. Fixing the entire fleet cost $137 million. Then they looked at the grim alternative. They calculated 180 horrific burn deaths. Paying victims settlements cost just $49.5 million. Letting you burn was mathematically cheaper. They put a price tag on a human life. It was a perfectly legal calculation. Read this confidential memo from late 1971. No additional safety features be adopted. They waited until the law forced their hand. Ford completely forgot their founding principles. The original mission was dead. Profits entirely replaced people. This was the first major visible crack. The rot was truly setting in. The company was losing its soul. But this was only the beginning. Part 1. The fatal flaw. Refusing to change. Did you know the rot started with Henry himself? His original formula was incredibly brilliant. Make one cheap car very fast. But Henry was impossibly stubborn. He hated evolving his own creation. General Motors started offering customers choices. Ford only offered black paint. Customers begged for new features. Henry absolutely refused to adopt. Ford lost the #1 spot in 1927. His massive ego was blinding. They eventually recovered from that early mistake, but the hard lesson never truly stuck. Fast forward to the 1990s. Japanese automakers were eating Detroit alive. Toyota built cars cheaper and much faster. Their cars rarely ever broke down. You could rely on them entirely. Ford completely ignored this looming threat. They thought they were untouchable. Arrogance blinded them to the invasion. Detroit responded with pure panic. Ford doubled down entirely on heavy trucks. The F-150 became their only real lifeline. It worked incredibly well for decades. The F-Series dominated the entire American market. It was the best-selling vehicle for 47 consecutive years. They felt invincible once again. Cash was flowing in effortlessly. But a dark shadow was growing. But here is the absolute truth. Hiding behind one single product is not a strategy. It is merely a delay of execution. The truck masked a total systemic failure. They had completely forgotten how to innovate. They were a vulnerable one-trick pony. The entire empire rested on one chassis. The clock was loudly ticking toward disaster. You could feel the tension building. Part 2. The breaking point. 2006. This is the year everything finally snapped. The legacy automaker hit a massive wall. The corporate facade completely crumbled to dust. $12.7 billion vanished into thin air. That was their annual loss in 2006. It was the biggest loss in Ford's history. The company was actively bleeding to death. Bankruptcy was staring them in the face. Survival was no longer guaranteed. A new CEO stepped right into the fire. Alan Mulally walked into absolute chaos. He asked why they lost money everywhere. Nobody had a single answer for him. It was a massive leadership vacuum. Factories were running at just 70% capacity. They built 97 confusing and bloated vehicle models. The company had zero clear identity left. They were lost in their own maze. Mully took desperate scorched earth action. He sold off Aston Martin and Jaguar. He liquidated Land Rover and Volvo entirely. He stripped it down to the absolute core. He kept only the main Ford brand. Then he bet everything on the F-150. It was a brutal, bloody survival tactic. There was absolutely no backup plan. If the truck failed, the company died. That desperate bet saved them temporarily, but it came at a terrible cost. They missed the electric revolution completely. Tesla was busy building the actual future. Ford was fiercely defending the fading past. Their truck addiction made them entirely blind. You can only ignore the future for so long. Eventually, the future always comes to collect. Now they are paying the ultimate price. Let us move forward to 2023. Watch how the denial builds into sheer disaster. Their electric vehicle division entered a death spiral. Quarter 2 saw $1.1 billion gone. Quarter 3 erased another $1.3 billion. Quarter 4 was a brutal $1.6 billion bleed. Customer demand had totally collapsed overnight. The bleeding was getting worse every single month. This brings us to the ultimate failure, $58,000. That is what Ford lost on every single EV. They lost $58,000 on every electric car sold. Think about that staggering reality for a moment. No business can survive that kind of brutal math. It is deeply unsustainable on every level. They were essentially paying you to take the cars. Part 3, the pattern, not the moral. This explainer is not about judging Ford. It is about identifying a deadly corporate cycle. This cycle destroys legacy giants constantly. Every fallen empire follows this exact path. First, they find one thing that works perfectly. Next, they fiercely protect it at all costs. Finally, they completely stop evolving altogether. Innovation dies a quiet death in the name of protection. Here is the ultimate corporate irony. The truck addiction saved Ford from total ruin, but that very same addiction eventually blinded them. Their greatest survival mechanism engineered their current downfall. What saves you today can kill you tomorrow. Comfort is the absolute enemy of progress. They fell in love with their own safety net. Trace the long journey of this dying empire. From 1908 genius to the dark Pinto memo. From the 2006 near collapse to today. Now they face a massive EV disaster. Ford is certainly not dead yet, but their next 5 years will decide absolutely everything. History is watching them very closely. Will they finally pivot, or will they perish? Do you want to see this pattern again? Look closely at Kodak. They waited far too long to change. I cover their exact downfall in another explainer. You really need to watch that one next. It reveals the exact same fatal mistakes. The warning signs are completely identical. Will Ford finally learn how to evolve, or will the F-150 become their final tombstone? We expose the hidden truth behind corporate empires. Subscribe to our explainer right now. You do not want to miss our next deep dive. The truth is always hiding in plain sight.